So, guys, there's a heated debate going on right now about the Commanders, and it's not just about one position, it's about almost the entire roster outside of Jayden Daniels. Some people are pointing at the wide receivers, some are pointing at the secondary, and others think the real issue is buried somewhere else entirely. I've been digging into all of it, and by the end of this video, I think you'll understand exactly where Washington's biggest risk is heading into 2026. What's up, Commanders fans? Welcome to the NFL Playbook Commanders. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So, guys, when you look at this roster coming out of minicamp, the conversation keeps circling back to the same two spots, the cornerback room and the wide receiver room. And honestly, I don't think there's a clean, easy answer here. Both of them have real question marks. But when I actually break it down piece by piece, one of them worries me a lot more than the other. Let's start with the secondary, because that's where I keep landing. Right now, if Trey Amos is starting on one outside corner spot and Amik Robertson is on the other, that's fine on paper. But Amos is coming off a major injury, and this is a guy who hasn't had to come back from something like that before. So you don't actually know how he responds to it until he's out there against real NFL competition. That's not a knock on him, that's just reality with injuries like this. Then you've got Mike Sainristil, and look, I know this conversation has been going on forever. Do you play him inside in the slot, or do you play him outside? If you actually go back and look at the tape from his rookie year, he was better outside. Then last year they moved him inside more. And even though the whole secondary struggled, he still graded out better on the outside again. So there's a real pattern here, and it seems like the coaching staff wants to keep running him inside anyway. I don't fully understand that decision, honestly. And here's the part that really worries me. If Amos is outside, and Robertson is outside, and Sainristil is stuck in the slot, who is actually your nickel corner if something goes wrong? I'm looking at this roster, and I don't see an obvious answer. That's the kind of thing that can quietly blow up a season, because injuries happen, and if you don't have a real answer at nickel, teams are going to attack that spot all season long. Then we look at safety, and that's not fully settled either. I like Nick Cross a lot, he's fast, he's got range, but he's more of a down-in-the-box type of player. Then you've got Quan Martin, who honestly had one of those seasons where he looked okay in some stretches and then really rough in others. So who's actually playing that free safety role, the guy who's supposed to be your last line of defense in the middle of the field? That's still an open question to me. There's been some talk that they could even slide Quan Martin back down to nickel, which tells you they might not fully trust the safety rotation as it stands right now either. But here's the thing that gives me a little bit of hope with this secondary, and it's the front four. If Dorrance Armstrong is fully healthy off that ACL, and you pair him with Odafe Oweh, who Washington just paid $100 million to bring in this offseason, that's a legitimately scary group off the edge. And in the middle, you've got Daron Payne paired up with Javon Kinlaw and a rising star like Jerzon Newton. That interior can really collapse a pocket in a hurry. If Durante Jones can actually get consistent pressure out of that front four without having to blitz every single play, that changes everything for the guys behind them. Because if a quarterback only has 2.5, 3 seconds to throw, it doesn't matter as much if your corners are a little inexperienced. That pass rush can genuinely bail out a shaky secondary. So I don't think this room is doomed, but it needs that front four to show up and show up early. Now let's flip over to the wide receivers, because I actually think this room gets more hate than it deserves. When you look at national rankings, they're putting Washington's receiver room near the bottom of the league. And look, if you're judging these guys purely off resumes and name value, sure, I get it. Outside of Terry McLaurin, there isn't a proven, established guy who's put up big numbers over multiple seasons. That part is fair. But here's what I keep coming back to. You have to factor in who's throwing them the ball. Jayden Daniels has already shown in year one that he can take guys nobody was talking about in the offseason and turn them into real weapons by December. That's not hype, that's something we already watched happen. So when people act like this receiver room is automatically a disaster just because of names on paper, I think they're missing the biggest variable in the whole equation. If I'm picking somebody who has to step up in that room, it's Treylon Burks. This guy has real talent, he was a high pick coming out, but he just hasn't had the health or the quarterback play to put it together yet. Now he's got both. If he can stay on the field, I think he's the guy who can become that second real weapon opposite Terry McLaurin. And then you've got the speed guys who can stretch the field and create space underneath, Luke McCaffrey, Jalen Lane, and Dyami Brown. None of these guys are going to scare anybody just from a name on a jersey. But if Jayden Daniels is getting the ball out on time and these guys are running the right routes, that group can be more productive than people expect. And that actually leads into something I think is a real positive here, and that's David Blough building this offense from scratch. This isn't a guy who's coming in with a system that was already built for somebody else's personnel and trying to force this roster into it. He's building this thing around Jayden Daniels and around the guys who are actually here. That's rare. It could go really well because it's tailor-made for what they have, or it could take some time to figure out because neither one of them has done this before at this level. But I actually lean positive on this one because when a quarterback has real ownership of the offense, That usually shows up in how comfortable he plays. So, if you're asking me which unit worries me more heading into 2026, I'm still landing on the secondary. The wide receiver concern is mostly about proven names, and I think Jayden Daniels covers for that. The secondary concern is about a lack of a clear answer at one of the most important spots on the field, nickel corner, and that's a real structural problem, not just a name recognition problem. Now let's shift into something else that's been a huge topic this offseason, and that's who's really on the hot seat, Dan Quinn or Adam Peters. Because after going 12-5 and reaching the NFC title game one year and then falling all the way to 5-12 the very next season, this organization looks almost like two completely different teams. And that kind of swing makes everybody start asking questions about accountability. Here's how I see it. Dan Quinn is the guy who's actually down on the field every single Sunday. He's the face fans see when things go wrong. And in this league, the head coach almost always takes the more immediate heat because the general manager is usually sitting up in the box with ownership while the games unfold. That proximity matters. If Dan Quinn doesn't win at least 7 or 8 games this year, and especially if this team misses the playoffs again, I think fans are going to be calling for his job, and honestly, that would be a fair reaction given where this roster is supposed to be. But I don't think Adam Peters is off the hook either. The whole Brandon Ayuk situation is a good example. We all know his relationship with the 49ers has completely fallen apart, and Washington has been heavily linked to him all offseason because of his connection to Jayden Daniels. But banking so heavily on waiting out a messy release situation with a star receiver instead of aggressively securing other proven targets in free agency, that's on Adam Peters. He took a gamble waiting on that situation to resolve, and it has left the wide receiver room incredibly thin heading into camp. Then you look at Jauan Jennings signing that big deal in Minnesota, and it sounds like Washington was never seriously in on him at all. If you get outbid, that's football. But if you're not even trying, that's a plan you're choosing not to pursue, and when your receiver room is already thin, that's a fair thing to question. And it's not just this offseason. Go back and look at some of the bigger swings Adam Peters has made. The Laramie Tunsil trade looks like a real positive. But the Martian Lattimore trade hasn't worked out the way anybody hoped, and paying Javon Kinlaw the money they did only for him to play all 17 games without a single sack. That's the kind of thing that makes people start questioning some of these bigger swings. Now, on the other side, Josh Harris has come out publicly and said he has confidence in both Dan Quinn and Adam Peters heading into this season. And there's actually a pretty simple explanation for why these two might really be tied together here. They came in as a package 2 years ago, they hired their staff together, they built this roster philosophy together, and if this season goes bad again, it's not hard to imagine ownership deciding to move on from both of them at the same time instead of picking one to protect. There's one more piece to this whole thing that I think doesn't get talked about enough, and that's the upcoming contract situation with Jayden Daniels. This is going to be the first real opportunity for the organization to sit down and negotiate his second contract. And if he goes out and has another really strong season, that's 2 great years out of 3 to start his career. Quarterbacks with that kind of production start to carry real influence in how an organization gets run, whether that's fair or not. That's just how this league works right now. If Jayden Daniels feels like the front office hasn't done enough to surround him with weapons on a rookie contract, that's a conversation that eventually makes its way into these kinds of decisions. That's where I'm at with this team heading into 2026. Let me know down in the comments which unit you're actually more worried about, the secondary or the receivers, and who you think is really on the hotter seat between Dan Quinn and Adam Peters. Appreciate everybody pulling up, and I'll see you in the next one.